Yaffee program on WVNN.
This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for my buddy Yaffee. Told me I could make an announcement. He has a beautiful baby boy, Isaac Yaffee. I think they have 3 kids now. They're on their way to 6 or 7. So, we'll keep going. We need the conservative married families out there. You guys have to do what Yaffee's doing, because we need to have the republic saved, and it's only happen if these conservative Christians have a lot of kids. So no pressure. On another topic, though, there's this Nick Shirley has released a new video about corruption and fraud, and it's going to be way worse than what we saw in Minnesota. It's just the beginning. Because California, I don't know if you guys knew this, but California, like Los Angeles, the area that's not even 1% of the total population of United States, and it has like 20% of all hospice care, and a lot of those are fraudulent, fake, like there's no healthcare workers. It's a complete scam. Now, the interesting thing, which is not that interesting, most of the scams, and I mean the majority, and I can say this because you can kind of look at the ones that have been prosecuted. What do you know? They're for people from foreign countries who we let become citizens, and they scam the system because, again, a lot of these people come from countries like Somalia or Sierra Leone or other places where corruption's not a thing. Like everybody, it's just people commit fraud. They steal from you. It's not, they weren't raised in a culture where they taught like the rule of law and like the basics of Western civilization. And then you expect them to come here and like, oh, you're an American now, so you totally are going to change your mindset. And that just doesn't happen. So this is an example of what happens when you have illegal immigration, and even more important, legal immigration, because up until 1965, about 95% of the people that came to America assimilated great, because we were taking them from places like Cuba, right? Those people assimilate great. We got a lot of people from Japan assimilate great. Europe assimilate great, right? Just there's a lot more. There's so many things culturally that we connect with, and with Cuba and Europe, it's similar culture, similar faith, similar background, a love of Western civilization. So again, like it's okay to take the best and brightest from different places. But what we used to do is say, all right, 95% of the people we're going to take are going to be people that we know are going to assimilate well. They have similar cultures, similar belief systems, and nobody accused us of being horrible. It's kind of funny, like all these people are like, oh, if we go back to the way it was back then, it'll mean we're the most horribly racist country on earth. I'm like, well, are you saying that during the John F. Kennedy administration, we were unfair to immigrants and we didn't have a fair process? Because that's not remotely true. But it is true that since 1965, depending on what numbers you look at, the majority of the people we've taken in legally have not assimilated well. A lot of them have been from third world. A lot of them we took in a lot of radical Islamists. I mean, you can kind of see that from all the terror attacks we've had. And what people think that, there hasn't been like a 9/11, so it just doesn't happen as much as you think. Well, actually, no. Since 9/11, there's been 49,000, roughly, a little bit more than that, Islamist terror attacks in the West alone. 49,000. So when you talk about bringing in people from the third world, you're going to have the Somali fraud stuff. You're going to have the Afghan situation where they murdered one of our National Guardsmen. You're going to have what's going on in California. And so people need to understand, like, the immigration is destiny. Like, we should be able to, we can take in great people, the people that will absolutely love this country, but taking in people from countries where they don't have records, okay? If they don't have records, I don't care what the country is, no, not a single person. Because it's not fair to bring in someone with a wild card who, could be great or could be a serial killer. Sorry, we're not doing that anymore. But we've got to change it. It's going to take Congress. And this is why we've got to get rid of the filibuster. This is because the filibuster is great if you have a center-left party that you can work with, like in the 90s. Well, I would have been against getting rid of it then because the Democrats worked with Republicans on about 80% of the major issues. And yeah, they held firm on 20. Okay, fine. Then we should have a filibuster. You got a center left party that's somewhat reasonable that we can do business with. The Democrats don't give us anything. I mean, even on 80-20 issues. In the 90s, it was like a 65-70 issue. Bill Clinton had a policy. If you had the overwhelming majority of Americans for something, even if the Democrats didn't like it, he would just go ahead and sign it into law, which I think is a smart policy. Democrats don't do that anymore. The SAVE Act, for example, which is getting debated, that has 83% support. People believe in voter ID. Even if you look at some of the more left-leaning polls where they were trying to say it doesn't have support, the worst left-leaning poll I could find from a group I did not trust was, only 71% of Americans actually agree with it. Yeah, but if you look at CNN, like the guy, Tony, I think the guy's Enton, he's hilarious. He's like that guy that does those funny graphics. He went on there, and this wasn't long ago. He's like, this is not controversial. 76% of African Americans believe in this, which is why this isn't Jim Crow 2.0. You have to have an ID for prescriptions to get on a plane. If you want to get any form of entitlement to get a library card, to register your kids for school, etc., you use IDs in 1,000 different ways. The idea that you can't use an ID one time when you vote is insane. Like, a lot of us have family that serves in the military. I've got a relative that's active, many relatives that did. I've got some ancestors that are buried in Arlington. And you think about like what they gave. You know what? Honoring them means we can have the slightest, and it's not even an inconvenience, but the slightest inconvenience, if you want to call it that, of bringing an ID. It doesn't have to be a driver's license. What about people who don't drive? Government issued IDs, you can get them for free in virtually every state. They can come out, a lot of times they'll come out to where you are. They can mail. I mean, like, it's not hard. And if you live in the same place, by the way, a lot of people live in the same place, but as long as you vote in the same place, you have to show your birth certificate one time. And if you don't know how to get your birth certificate, you can go online. It's super easy. They'll mail it to you in 2 weeks. It's a 5-minute form, not hard. Voting's not till 7 months. And I'm sure every state, especially Democrat states, are going to go everywhere and make sure people do it if the SAVE Act pass. And this is why we need the SAVE Act. We'll get to the Nick Shirley stuff next because I just want to go over this. It's so important. You have 19 million illegal immigrants at the low end. The low end. Now, thank God for Trump. We have deported 3.3 illegals. Most of that's through we've created incentives for self-deportation because we said, look, you want us to do what ICE doing to people whenever they don't comply, or you can comply. We will pay for your trip back. We'll give you some spending money, and you can reapply lawfully. We're not going to guarantee you can come back, but if you make us deport you, you're never coming back. You're not coming back to visit because that's currently what the standard is. That you can be banned usually for a period of years. I don't know if it's like 10. It can be forever depending on what it is. And that's why we're getting so many people. That's why we need those commercials that constantly run everywhere saying, look, self-deport, we'll pay for your ticket, we'll give you some money. Some people object to that. But by the way, it costs the American taxpayer for every one illegal we deport about $15,000 to $17,000. For the self-deports, even with the ticket or whatever, it costs maybe $3,000 to $4,000. So it's a huge cost save. They're out of the country either way, okay? And it's not like we're going to let people self-deport if they have like pending criminal cases. So we're not letting them go back to their countries to do that. If they do that, we're taking them to jail. We're going to, send them somewhere where they're going to be in jail. So we're doing everything we can. If only the freaking Republican Congress would do what is necessary. Now, the House has passed it, so don't get mad at your House reps. They all voted for it. All the Republicans did, except for probably Massey or somebody. I don't know. Maybe even he did for this one. It's the Senate. You got to get your senators to do this. How is it we have 19 million people, that many of which live in states that automatically register you to vote if you have a driver's license, and those same exact states give driver's license to illegal immigrants? They don't even have a form which says, okay, you can get a driver's license, but just put here that you're not a citizen so we don't also register you to vote. None of the Democrat states do that. You know why they don't do that? Because they want them voting for it. Because who do you think illegals are going to vote for? They're going to vote for the party that wants to deport them? No, they would be insane to do that. They're going to vote for the Dems because they're going to give them all kinds of free stuff. It's going to be amazing. They can just sit on their butts like the Somalis do. 80% plus of them are on welfare. And by the way, one more stat about that. The average native Minnesotan pays $8,000 per year in state and local taxes. The average Somali pays $800 because most of them are unemployed. And if they do work, it's part-time. And that's why for every $1 they pay in taxes, it costs $30 for what they're getting. It's a total scam, and that's why we need people like Nick Shirley. But that's also why we need the SAVE Act, because I'm tired of the Dems getting all these votes from people that shouldn't be voting anyway, and they definitely shouldn't be in our country. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
It's the Yaffee Program on WVNN.
When you really need care, you need 24/7 access to a care team, not a maze of paperwork from a third party. Every day, America's hospitals and health systems show up for you. Navigating healthcare can feel overwhelming, but you can count on real doctors, real nurses, real people, providing quality, around-the-clock care when you need it most. They're in your corner, in communities across America. Your neighbors, your lifelines, right beside you, holding your hand and helping find answers. That's what putting patients first actually means. Learn more at strengthenhealthcare.org. Brought to you by the Coalition to Strengthen America's Healthcare.
This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy. Just love to give another congratulations to my buddy Yaffee for his healthy baby boy Isaac. I know he is thrilled, and his wife Stephanie is doing so well. He appreciates all the prayers you guys gave him as well. All right. I wanted to talk about the DHS shutdown. Why is it that we still have a shutdown when we've had, 6, 7 terrorist attacks over the last 2 weeks? And by the way, all of these terrorist attacks are from naturalized citizens that are Islamic, or the children of naturalized citizens from places like Afghanistan, Sierra Leone. And, of course, the media is going to pretend, we don't have a problem with radical Islam. It's just a few people. I'm like, yeah, but let's say there's 2 billion Muslims on Earth. And there is. Let's say 99% of them are peaceful. Okay, that's roughly 20 million ones that are not. And if you're talking about the in America, say, think about how crazy it would be if you got a couple million people here, and let's say 99 are peaceful, love the country, moderate, whatever you want to be. 1% aren't. That's 30, 40,000 people. Okay, that's a lot of people that you're dealing with. So DHS should not be shut down. And they're doing this because of ICE, supposedly, but ICE is funded until 2029. In fact, ICE is funded at a rate till 2029 that we don't even need the DHS supplemental. I think there's an extra $10 billion for ICE if they want it. We don't even need that. We are overfunded. We have plenty of money. We can deport people every single day to our heart's desire. I mean, the extra money would obviously, of course, we deserve that. But the Democrats, because they don't like ICE, think that they're going to make that point by shutting down TSA. Also, if there's a disaster over the next, I don't know how long this is shut down, but if it's shut down too long, what if there's something we need FEMA? Well, nope, no funding. And TSA, by the way, even if you reopen it, it's already done their damage. That's the whole point. We lost, because of the Democrat shutdowns, we lost around 1,500 TSA agents, around 400 in the last couple of weeks. It's because TSA, those people don't get paid that much, and they will get 100% of whatever they lost. But these people, a lot of them are paycheck to paycheck. You know, they're newly married. They live in expensive cities. They can't afford to miss paychecks. They just can't. Democrats know this, and they want to create havoc because they believe that if they create havoc for you, you are too stupid to realize that it was the Democrats who did it. And that's not even true. Normies actually do find out that their ideas about like blaming Republicans for shutdowns are from decades ago. If you look at the recent shutdowns, Americans blame the Democrats. What they thought was working, by the way, is that we had successful elections in Virginia and New Jersey and New York City. Well, those are super Democrat places. In all those states, the Democrats won, by around 10 points to 20 points in the presidential election for Kamala Harris. Virginia was a fluke when we won it a couple years back, and we barely won that. It was a squeaker, okay? So they thought, well, it's going to be just like that in Texas. It's not going to be like that in Texas, okay? They are doing this to their own detriment. They have no plan. All they do is they don't want Americans to be taken care of. They don't want you to be safe. And Democrats didn't used to be this way. Fetterman's not like this. I mean, I disagree with Fetterman a lot, but he actually did vote for the TSA to be open. He's the only one. I mean, you look in the 90s, you look at Democrats, there would be a moderate proposal. If there was, let's say, 45 Democrat senators, you'd probably get 23 of them or 24 of them, like a bare majority, to vote with the Republicans on some moderate proposal. Today, you get one. And it's not like there's not moderate Democrat voters, because about 38% of Democrats who moderate Dems, if you actually look at what they believe in on policy, they agree with Republicans on average on 70% of policy that they deem to be in the top 10, right? But a lot of them don't realize, if you actually go and talk to those people, they're not aware that the Democratic Party doesn't agree with them on the policies. It's really interesting. Like if you do these focus groups, and I've got buddies that do them, the hardest thing we had to deal with in 24 is that they did not believe us about the Kamala and the trans stuff, and because they were like, there's no way she said that. That's just a lie. But then we showed them a video of her saying that. We showed the right where she wrote it. We showed a second video of her saying that. Then we showed an interview with Brett Baer where she basically didn't deny it. And after 4 showings, they said, oh, this is crazy. I can't believe she said that. Like, well, maybe you should believe Republicans instead of just, assuming we're lying to you. Not that, yeah, I'm not saying there's never a possibility that Republicans are going to be, dishonest, because that's a human condition. But when Republicans talk about their policy, they actually rarely lie about policy. Democrats will almost always lie or deceive about policy, and I understand why, because they're on the wrong side. Like, think about it. If 83% of people agree with voter ID, are you going to tell people, oh, well, we don't want that? No, because people think you're stupid. What they'll say is, well, some people, if they get married, it's impossible for them to ever get, documents, and it would be confusing. Like, I'm not married. Everyone knows married. I asked them, it's like, this going to be an issue? Like, no. They're like, it took me 15 minutes. I had to fill out this form, and it was great. And plus, there's a thing in there that's like a hardship thing that basically gives states the right to make it easier for these individuals. But also, by the way, you know how married women voted in 2024? Oh, they went about 6 points Republican. They didn't go huge Republican. So here's another thing Democrats want you to believe is, like, why would we want a demographic like married women, which have voted Republican for the last 30 years, on average, between 5 and 10 points? Why would we do you really think we want to see to it they can't vote? Do you really think that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Even if we were like the horrible, terrible people that Democrats say we were, we wouldn't do that just from a political standpoint. So that's why that part, you can dismiss that out of hand, okay? And so, again, all this stuff comes down to, like, Democrats, I'm telling you, it's fraud, foreigners, cheating. That's all there is. That's all there is to it. And we'll see what happens. Mike Lee says, who's a great senator from Utah, says he's going to fight to the end. He's going to fight for the SAVE Act because he's trying to save America. But, it's going to be real hard. It's going to be real hard to get this thing done. But you know what? There's been many times in Congress's history where they fought tooth and nail to get a lot of good legislation through. Like, John Thune said, well, it's never been done this way. That's not true. Like the Voting Rights Act, which made it impossible, like, where you couldn't discriminate against people. If somebody is an American citizen, whether they were a black, white, Hispanic, or whatever, you couldn't make it to where they couldn't vote. And that they had to fight that. Now, they didn't have to fight that from Republicans, because Republicans, I think virtually all of them or all of them voted for that. It was Southern Democrats that didn't. They filibustered it. So the real reason the senators don't want to do this, I know they're not going to tell you this, but you've got a lot of senators over the age of 80, and to do a talking filibuster they'd have to be near the Senate chambers for 4 or 5 days. And you got people there that are like 92, and it'd be tough for them. They're worried about health. I'm like, well, if that's the case, look, if you can't do the job as a senator, you shouldn't be in the Senate. And plus, it's not every Republican would have to be there. You just need a simple quorum, meaning you could get, 27 Republicans, 24 Democrats, whatever you want to do. And some people get arrested. Other people could, but I get it. In order to do things in life, it's going to be hard. But the Republican Party has gotten away from the idea that they work for us. But they do work for us. But I promise you what makes a difference. The more you guys call Congress, call the Senate, email letters, that does make a difference. I used to work there, and trust me, even some of the squishy ones, if they got a lot of phone calls, they would do the right thing, not because they were good people, but because they didn't want to lose. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Yaffee on WVNN.
This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy. You can also listen to us every day from 2 to 4 on WVNN. Filling in for my colleague, Yaffee. We're going to have a great guest on next hour, Isaac Willauer, a good friend of mine. He's been on Fox, Daily Wire, really done some amazing work on DEI, but I want to get his take on some international stuff. He's got a really great way of thinking. There's this great story that's come out. It's been on just every news outlet. But California and Washington have both are both on their way to or have passed these ridiculous millionaire or billionaire taxes, which basically are not taxes on income. Okay, here's what they do. They're saying if you're over $1 billion, we're going to just steal your wealth. Well, anyone with a brain knows, like, you may be worth $1 billion, but that might be tied up in real estate. That might be tied up in your company. And the state of California is like, we're going to take a one-time, it's never one time, 5%, a wealth confiscatory tax. Well, in California, guess what? $500 billion to $1 trillion of their tax base is left. And they're going to be $70 billion in debt over the next few years. And you got to understand, in California, these billionaires were paying somewhere around 30 to 40%, or at least like the top 0.5% were, and they're included in that number. And so basically, California's been bilking their wealthy citizens to pay for their social services and their fraud and welfare schemes. Well, guess what? You can only do that so much before people say enough. And the funny thing is even the most liberal commie dirtbags eventually say enough. This is from Seattle Red, Jason Rantz. He's been on the show before. Great dude's got a radio show out on 7070 AM Seattle. Says Senator Rick Scott mocks Howard Schultz for fleeing Washington's socialist income tax. It comes to Florida. It says Rick Scott is having a field day after the Starbucks founder announced he was leaving Seattle for Miami. On the same night, Washington Democrats passed a sweeping income tax on high earners. Scott took to social media. As the Jason Rantz show previously reported, Schultz announced the move on LinkedIn while the State House finalized passage of the income tax bill, which Governor Bob Ferguson is expected to sign immediately. He did sign. Cited Florida's sunshine and proximity to children as the reason, but come on now. It's because he doesn't want to lose his wealth. He's like, now who saw this happen? He said, okay, somebody that historically has loved socialist policies has moved to the free state of Florida, including, by the way, Jeff Bezos. Bezos gave, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to left-wing causes. His wife is his ex-wife. I'm glad he's divorced. I mean, she's even worse. He left for Florida because he doesn't want to get hosed. You got the founders. I think the founders of Google have either left for Texas or Florida. The whole point is Democrats, they go so far, they ruin their states, and then they don't realize, like, if you try to tax people that are extremely mobile and could take their wealth anywhere, they're going to move. There is this great study that was, I think it was done in Sweden, that shows for every 0.1% like wealth tax that you increase in the wealth tax that you made, 0.1%. We're not talking about big ones. You lost 3.5% of tax revenue. So every state that's doing these wealth tax is actually going to get less tax, which is awesome because people don't have to stay in your stupid blue state and get hosed. Like, why would they? They'll go and bring their wealth to Florida. That's why places like Huntsville are doing so amazing. We're getting people from New York, California, Illinois, and everyone thinks, and I've said this on the show so many times, like there's been so many studies done on this, guys. I don't know how else to say this. About 60% of the people that move here from blue states vote Republican or are center right. Because again, a lot of the people that are super far left, a lot of them just stay out of pride or like because they're willing to suffer through it, which is crazy. Now the billionaires won't because they're getting extremely hosed. But for the most part, when we see people from like those states, we think, oh, they're going to vote Democrat. Look at Florida. Florida had a majority of people that voted Democrat in 2018, a lot more Democrats than Republicans, right? They got Republicans out-registered Democrats by millions now. And you know where that came from? Well, part of it's because DeSantis is such an amazing governor. People decided to leave the Democrat Party. But more of it came because Republicans from blue states all over the country decided, I'm done with this. I'm getting out of California. I'm moving there. And it's great because they're not bringing their ridiculous values. They're making Florida way more red. So one of the good things that can happen is, yeah, California may get more blue, but here's what's going to happen to California. They're going to lose several congressional seats, right? Because so many people are fleeing the state. Plus, if we actually pass the law where you can't count illegal aliens in the census, they'll lose more than 10 seats because they have the largest illegal alien population in America by far. So by 2031, we're going to have so many new seats in the Southeast and Midwest that we could lose Pennsylvania, we could lose Wisconsin, Michigan. It won't matter. It really won't. Like, again, the reason Democrats want these foreign hordes to come in and destroy this country is because it gives them more power. And that's all the Democrats care about. It didn't used to be. I don't think 30 years ago, the average Democrat, even the ones in D.C., I think if you ask them, like, do you generally love America? Are you patriotic? They'd say yes. In fact, there was a poll done in 2021, and this is during a Republican president, let me be clear, and it said, do you consider yourself very patriotic? Republicans, 92%. Democrats, like 85%. Okay, so yeah, Republicans were more, but it wasn't that much. You know what it is now? Republicans, 91%. Democrats, 37%. 37%. And when asked, do you think on the whole, doesn't mean America's done everything perfect or we don't have some bad things in our history like every other country, but on the whole, has America been a force for good? Republicans, 85, 90%, depending on how you look at it. Democrats, is like 30. So 70% of people that vote Democrat think that overall, it would have been, America has been a force for evil, despite the fact that we defeated communism, Nazism. We protected our allies in World War I. About 70 to 80% of all the major inventions on Earth came from 5% of the population, which is the United States. So almost every innovation you can think of. Sure, there was some that came from Asia and Europe, other places. 80%? It means without the United States, we would probably be about 50 to 75 years behind where we are now. And people are going to say, oh, we're a force for evil because X, Y, Z. Look, every country has things that were bad. Not every country has things that are good. I don't think Somalia's ever done anything good. I'll be honest with you. Like 15% of their economy was piracy. So I don't know how we're going to say that they've ever done anything in mass that was good. So that country, no. Haiti, probably not. But for most part, most countries are going to have done some things that are positive and some things that are very negative. America is overall a wonderful country. We've got wonderful people. Like you hear these stories of people that gave their lives in the current Iran conflict. We had a young man from Auburn, Alabama, with 3 kids and a wife. And I remember, listening to the stories of his life and his family and all these people talking about like what an amazing American patriot. What a guy who loved this country with everything that he absolutely had. And there are so many young men and women like that man still in this country, and that's why this country is worth fighting for. And the idea that the Democrats will not don't even want to have the most basic requirement for voting, meaning you have to be a citizen, or at least you have to show an ID. It just shows you. What does it show you? It shows you that they know they get a lot of votes from people that shouldn't vote, and they care more about winning than protecting the country. And that's been that way for a long time. And until, like, the reason Republicans are still really good on, like, some of the polling, by the way, it's because a lot of people left the Democrat Party and became Republicans in the last 25 years. The people that were generally in the 87 percentile in 2001 and are not in the 37 percentile, a lot of those people either switched to independent or Republican. And the ones that were very anti-American, they're still anti-American. There's also a huge religious divide. You look at the people that vote Republican, registered Republicans, something like majority of them go to church, at least, consistently, 70% have some affiliation if they only go like maybe once a month. But if you look at Democrats, it's like, I think only 20% would say they go to any sort of religious worship, like, at a normal pace. So, I mean, there's been, and it wasn't that way. In the 90s, about 60% of Democrats were pretty consistent in going to a house of worship. So that's gone down by 300%. Or it depends on how you look at that. I guess it's a third of what it was. So there's a huge divide in the parties right now. And a lot of it is not just policy. There's a policy divide, but it's a Democrats who you could argue 30 years ago really loved the country but had bad policies. A lot of them don't love the country, and it's not me saying that. It's me saying 37% of them say they're not patriotic, and only 30% of them say, on the whole, America is a good country, and that's not good. And my goal is to get the 37% and the 30%. These are mostly moderate Dems to come vote for us. We got to get them over in our party or switch them to independent. But I wish the Democrat Party would switch to more moderate, like they were. I hope they do. It's a dangerous thing to have a far left party like the Dems are now. I hope they go back to where they were after Clinton brought them back to sanity. I don't see that happening. But that's why everything that we do, they're fighting us tooth and nail. And we can't, it's just not a safe place for us. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
The Yaffee Program.
Every day, excessive delays and denials from big insurers keep patients from accessing the care they need. And when care is urgent, these delays can be disastrous. These practices cost billions in wasteful spending, driving up costs for American families. But while big insurers put up barriers, America's hospitals and health systems are in your corner, navigating endless reviews and appeals to get you the care you need when you need it most. It's time to curb these harmful practices and put the focus back on patients. Brought to you by the Coalition to Strengthen America's Healthcare.
This is Chris Reed from Daily Controversy. We're going to bring on Isaac Willauer in just a second. Hope you guys are having a great day. An interesting thing happened. And I wasn't sure I was going to cover this, but it's a worthwhile story. So there was this guy who named Paul Ehrlich, and he predicted many, many things. But one of his big predictions was that we would run out of food, and there'd be a population bomb, and there'd be mass starving, and everything he said was wrong. But people listened to him, and that's why you had countries like China. In part, they did their one-child policy, where they forced tens of millions of abortions on women who didn't want to have them because they believed, this is our country. We're never gonna have the food to feed them. But now, the reason China is growing so slowly is because they don't have enough workers. They've got a lot of old people, not enough young. That's hurting their military. They were going from 8% growth per year. Now they're going from 3 to 4%. We can't even trust that. But this is interesting. You may have caught the New York Times obituary. It says, Paul Ehrlich, an eminent ecologist and population scientist whose best-selling book, The Population Bomb, was celebrated as prescient warning of a coming age of food shortages, died. I was like, it's stunning. This is what people said about this. It's stunning, not just how wrong Ehrlich was, or evil he was, and he was evil. I'm sorry, he was. But how constantly our media amplified him and is still covering for his endless, and I mean endless, failed predictions. And that's the thing on the left. You can be wrong as much as you want. It doesn't matter. You will still be heralded as, oh, he was a champion. He's a champion of lies. That's the frustrating thing. He lied. It says prescient warning. Prescient means before they happen, but none of the things that he predicted actually happened. The population bomb did indeed ward a catastrophic looming environmental crisis, including families and mass death. It says in the 1970s and 80s, he predicted hundreds of millions of people will starve to death. This was, of course, wrong. It did not happen. It was hard to overstate how wrong he was. Indeed, after the communist-run Great Leap Forward famine of the 50s and 60s, China, major famines have become vanishingly rare on the global stage. Elsewhere in the comical essay that presented itself as being written from the future, Elric claimed the U.S. population in 1999 would be 22 million because of the great die-off. Again, this guy, his works were taught in every major college as gospel. They weren't just taught as it could be this way. They were taught basically they will be this way. That's why we got all the, the Captain Planet crap in the 90s and, the world's going to end and the ozone. None of that stuff happened. Not a single one of it. It's like when they talk about Arctic ice, we're going to melt and we're going to, sea level's going to rise by X number of feet. Zero of that happened. Polar bears are going to die out by 2015. I think there's something around 2 times more polar bears now than there were when Al Gore made that movie. Anyway, he also predicted in 10 years, this is 10 years from the 60s, in 10 years, all important animal life in the sea will die. Large areas of coastline will be evacuated. Y'all, the fish didn't die. We still have fish in the ocean, at least until communist China sucks the ocean dry. In 1969, he also placed a high probability on the likelihood that England would not exist. Well, England doesn't really exist anymore because it's become a radical Islamic state, but it technically exists in the sense of it's still a country, and that it would at least be a ruined country. It said, if current trends continue, he said at a crowded meeting held at the Institute of Biology, by year 2000, the United Kingdom will simply be a small group of impoverished islands inhabited by some 70 million hungry people of little or no concern to the sick world. England, of course, is fine in 2000, like I said, until they started taking in third world radical Islamists. Amazing, his predictions even address the possibility of obesity-related chemical poisoning. The day may come when the obese people of the world must give up diet since metabolizing their fat deposits will lead to DDP poisoning. Basically, he said we're going to end the obesity. Well, he was wrong on that. I mean, I would love to see obesity down, but that's there was no mass DDT poisoning. He got all of that wrong. It says here, we'll chalk. I mean, again, he lived 93 years, but and sad for his family that he's lost. I'm not going to say anything bad about that. Like, we don't celebrate the death of anyone. I would never do that. But we have to give an honest, view. Okay, this guy spent his entire life saying things that were there's a little bit of a echo. Isaac, if you could mute your thing until next segment. So everything that guy said ended up being false. It did, but it wasn't just that he made predictions. He made predictions that countries relied on, and countries like China, like I said, they did the one-child policy. Tens of millions of babies weren't born because of that, and it wasn't because those people they didn't want to have kids. It's because they relied on Eric and other people like him, and these environmental disasters that you guys have heard from for if you're older, your entire life. In the 1970s, my dad was University of Alabama. He was in pre-med, and he had a professor saying, there's this global cooling crisis, and by the end of end of the century, it's going to be 5 to 10 degrees cooler, and none of that happened. And then it was the global warming crisis, and now it's global climate change. And again, and every time that these radically wrong predictions happen, what did happen? Your taxes went up. And one of the issues we have right now is because of the radical environmentalists and people like Eric and his ilk. It used to be that Europe was able to provide most of their energy. Germany had a ton of nuclear power plants, but they got rid of them, and now they rely on a lot of Russian oil. And how Putin's able to fight the Ukraine war effectively? Because Europe is paying for a lot of the oil that he produces. Now, sometimes they get around these sanctions, do different things. but it's just a reality. And President Bush, I was in D.C. in 2007. I worked at the Heritage Foundation. I worked for Republican leadership, and that was during the Bush administration. And Bush went to a meeting in Europe, and Bush, like, by the way, Trump did this too. And Bush got a lot of things wrong, but one thing he didn't get wrong is saying, like, look, if you guys embrace this environmentalist hysteria, your population is going to be paying 40 to 60% more than the rest of the world when it comes to energy, which they actually, I think they may be paying a lot more than that depending on the country. He also said you're going to be dependent on your enemies for your economy. And by saying that, he's like, look, the whole point of NATO was founded as the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance as organization, to push back against the Soviet Union and Russia, okay? And then Soviet Union first, when it fell, then Russia. And the idea that NATO countries would ever be dependent on Russia for their energy needs was truly insane. And Bush pointed this out. Trump pointed this out 10 years later in 2017. He said, look, this is what you guys are doing is dangerous. You know what they did to Bush and Trump? They laughed at him. They thought, oh, this is funny. This is hilarious. Well, it's not funny now because the massive wealth that Russia was able to accrue in large part is because Europe, instead of being able to take care of themselves, they weren't. And the countries that embraced some of these radical green policies championed by people like Urlik, like Spain, they've had massive recession for a very long time. So, look, ideas matter, but we've got to examine ideas, look at them critically, and mock the ones that are ridiculous. Otherwise, people may believe them. All right, we got Isaac Willauer coming on in just a second.
It's the Yaffee Program on WVNN. The Yaffee Program on WVNN.
You're listening to the Yaffee Program. This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy. Our friend and colleague Yaffee, he just, I guess technically his wife just had their third child, baby boy Isaac, we do have Isaac on, although it's not his child because he is older. Isaac Willauer, who's been in the Daily Wire, Fox, pretty much everywhere, has done amazing research. And I wanted to get your thoughts, Isaac, on several things, but one of the topics which my audience can't get enough of is this guy, James Tallarico. I know you're not a fan. I'm not either. But I think the problem is that if there's plenty of liberals out there, right? You got Bernie Sanders, all these, AOC, and we disagree with them. I think what we as people who grew up in the Christian faith, I know your dad's a pastor, and it's just, he's trying to use Christianity as justification for why we should vote for him, but he's saying things that Christianity doesn't believe as if they did. One of the ones we've talked about is he's saying that the conception of Christ somehow justifies abortion because Mary gave consent, which is it's not in the passage. It's ridiculous. It's idiotic. And he says, the Bible doesn't talk about abortion and it doesn't talk about child genital mutilation surgeries. I'm like, well, the Bible says don't kill innocent life, and I formed you in the womb, and it's just like, and that's almost like making the argument. Well, the Bible never said you couldn't club somebody in the head with, a baseball bat, so I guess that's fine. Although the Bible tells you not to kill, it defines very clearly what innocent life is, so it doesn't have to give you 1,000 different ways that you could do it. And obviously at that time, the idea of intentionally trying to kill your child would have been insane, but even the early church writes about it. And then James Tallarico also said God is non-binary. He says there are 6 definable genders. He actually, too, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but he believes in a world without prisons. And he also, and this is going to hurt him in Texas probably more than that, he wants us to stop eating meat. So what are your thoughts on this guy? Because I really think that his ploy to try to make his communist views Christian is not going to be as effective as you think, especially because the Republicans have like $100 million to spend on negative campaign ads. What are your thoughts?
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a lot here. First of all, good to be back on the show. Thank you for clarifying. I am not Yaffee's child who was just born. Great to be back. So This James Tallarico fellow. So yeah, not a fan. I think to your point about about the Bible's stance on clubbing people over the head. I mean, there was that bit in Genesis where Cain clubbed his brother over the head, and I think God's posture on that was pretty clear. And elsewhere in the other 65 books. But I think the important thing to remember about someone like James Tallarico is, look, this whole notion of if you twist the Bible around and you kind of view it through a kaleidoscope of a lens, you can eventually kind of gymnastics your way into the Bible supports every single one of my political positions that happen to align perfectly with my lobbying positions and what I want out of the Democratic Party. This is not a new strategy, right? This is in fact a very, very old strategy, which is why it's been kind of baffling to see a lot of religion outlets and political outlets treating this like this is some new face. Because what James Tallarico's kind of rhetorical push is, well, I'm a response to quote unquote Christian nationalism. And Christian nationalism, obviously, a chronically undefined term. In this case, what James Tallarico seems to really have a problem with is Christians voting right of center. But the problem is that's not a new ploy. It's actually a very, very old ploy. It's actually a ploy that predates a lot of our modern debates around Christian nationalism. Because the notion that the Bible is inherently progressive and the notions of, well, the economic justice in the Bible means that you have to support government redistribution and you have to support abortion. And obviously this wasn't the case back then because it wasn't an issue. But now you have to support things like gender transition surgery, this sort of thing. This is a very old ploy. This was the ploy of many of, Chris, you mentioned that we both grew up Christian. A lot of mainstream Christian denominations have been preaching this sort of thing for many, many years. And as a result, their churches are empty and their denominations are dying. This is old school stuff. This is old school progressive Christianity in the sense of there is nothing new about this. This is a very old ploy masquerading as a new ploy. And for the record, right, when James Tallarico talks about things like what is the fundamental economic message of the Bible, economic justice, it's critically important we actually talk about what that means. Because if you read the New Testament, I'm sure many of your listeners have read the New Testament many times, is it about vague economic justice in the sense of just a vague reference that kind of vaguely references racial trauma and all this sort of thing, conveniently ends up worming its way around to supporting the economic platform of the 2026 Democratic Party? Or is the economic message of the New Testament a warning about the way in which a corrupt state has tremendous power for economic exploitation of the poor and violations of human rights? That's a significantly cleaner read economically on the New Testament, right? And I run into this all the time. Obviously, I'm a director at a corporate engagement firm. That's my day job. So I deal with the kind of intersection of Christian thought and economics all the time. And the notion that the Bible is just vaguely socialist, this is a very old idea. This has been around for literal decades, especially in American Christianity. It's been especially hardcore in American Christianity. And it's tired. It's nothing new. I am not an electoral predictions person. I'm not going to predict how this goes, but I think in terms of negative press, yeah, there are about 70,000 attack ads of just the absolutely nutty things that this guy has said, up to and including things about the southern border that we'll just say would not pull well in Texas. And then, of course, his being anti-meat, which is, of course, the most satanic of all these monsters, is ridiculous. But it's not new, right? It's not new. Chances are, whether he wins or not, that brand of thinking, that brand of kind of tiredly trying to fuse progressive politics with Christian orthodoxy, this has been tried before, and it's not 1960 anymore, right? It's 2026. We're kind of past that debate, and if it works one time, the notion that we're going to revert back to that as the default posture of the Democratic Party, by the way, the Democratic Party has proven itself just so interested in advancing Christianity. I don't think so. I think this is an old argument, and it's going to go the same way that old arguments do, which is going to be roundly rebuked at large.
Yeah, I mean, with his economic stuff, I mean, like the scriptures teach, like if you don't work, you shouldn't eat, or if if you don't take care of your family, then you're worse than infidel. Now the scriptures make exceptions, obviously, like for people that can't take care of themselves, for the disabled, for different things. Like there's nuance in that, but the idea that the scripture would say we're going to force you at gunpoint to pay for your neighbor who just simply doesn't want to work because they feel like they don't have to, and we're going to take from you. I mean, that's actually theft.
Yeah, well, and I would
that's
go a step further, Chris. Honestly, I would say when it comes to things like property rights, the ability to own the things that you create, the ability to genuinely own the things that you gain ethically, those ideas didn't like pop out of the ether from Aristotle or whatever. Those ideas came from scripture, right? A lot of, and I'm not saying that every jot and tittle of the current capitalistic free enterprise system is divinely ordained by God, but it's fundamental underpinnings about who people are, what they produce, what they can do with the things that they produce based on their internal, immutable, intransferable value as being created in God's image, our core economic ideas surrounding individual freedom, those come from scripture. And so if we're talking about rebutting those ideas, like it's one thing for people like James Tallarico to say that the Bible is a straightforward highway to left-wing economic policies. But we actually have to explain why that's not true. And I think right now we're in a moment where certainly segments of the left, but a growing segment of the right doesn't really seem to understand the fundamentally creational underpinnings of our economics. And we need to be able to talk about that better. Because when we don't talk about it well, when it's basically nationalism versus nationalism wearing two different flags or two different red jersey and a blue jersey, that takes you into some really bad places. And we have to remember that as Christians, we actually have something deeper to share.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We'll definitely get into more of those topics as well. But I ultimately think people have tried to twist the scriptures from the beginning. Paul talks about the Gnostics. We're not going to go into
yes,
it just is, like you said, a tired thing. I don't think it's going to work. And trying to tell people like the Bible says this when you can just look at it and realize it doesn't. But I'm hopeful that the American church will stand up, talk about this in a way that is constructive and actually informs its people. I've talked to some pastors that will do that, but I think it'll be good to have this debate because I think James Tallarico is like you said, he's no different from con artists or apostates of the past, but I do think he's going to get roundly rebuked. Let's take a quick break. We got more coming up.
You're listening to Yaffee on WVNN.
This is Chris Reed from the Daily Controversy, filling in for my buddy Yaffee. We've got Isaac Willauer on the show, and there was some breaking news yesterday. Joe Kent, a high-ranking advisor in the Trump administration, was decided to resign, and it's really interesting because he did so in the middle of an Iranian conflict and basically accused the president of just being in the bag for Israel and all these other things. And it does seem like there's a large reason for why he did that, and it seems also he's one of those guys that's going to be on every podcast and TV show for the next 2 years talking about how he slammed the president. But what are your thoughts on this, Isaac? And just if you want to give a little more background to this to the audience, I think it would help. But why did Joe Kent do that, and what do you think his motives were?
Well, so I can't speak to Joe Kent's motives, right? It's important to remember that Joe Kent, I think it was his first wife, I want to say, was tragically lost her life in a suicide bombing. I believe it was in Syria. So he has a personal connection to the notion of war in the Middle East in general that I think I am justified in believing he probably views very negatively. And look, I mean, if someone I was close to lost their life tragically in the same way, I can't say that I wouldn't have similar kind of emotional impulses about that. But I want to say a couple of things. One to your point of the people who go on podcasts after slamming Trump and it just kind of ends up being this thing. There's this Catholic convention. I can't remember what it's called. It's one of these
Catholics for Catholics, yeah.
Yeah, right. Catholics for Catholics, which is like a weird title. But pretty much as soon as this letter from Joe Kent dropped, it was announced that he was now speaking at this. And I mean, this I'm sure there are some great speakers at this conference, but the top line is really wild. It's like Candace Owens, now Joe Kent, and Carrie Prejean Baller, the one who just had the embarrassing kind of flub at the Religious Liberty Commission. There's this weird thing of like, as soon as you criticize something that you don't love, there's a segment of that world that just gets funneled directly into. As soon as you voice any opposition, you now have to get funneled into opposition corp, right? You kind of get funneled into the opposition, and you're immediately thrown in front of an audience that's willing to hear it, which I understand why that is. There's a market for everything. I get it. But I want to address the thing that Joe Kent said that I think is, again, he's a professional. He's been doing this for years. I can't speak to his motives. I totally believe that he's sincere. I'm not saying that he's insincere at all. But he basically insinuates that this was a grandiose design on the part of the Israel lobby that has basically coerced Trump into initiating Operation Epic Fury and initiating hostilities with Iran. Look, we really don't. And I think I see this a lot. This part is not about Joe Kent, but I talk to a lot of people who are about my age. I'm 24, right? People who are like Gen Z, kind of right of center. I'm not going to call them conservatives. People who are very staunchly isolationist, like to the point where it's weird. And I ask them about these sorts of things. And the general presumption is that it's all Israel. And well, what about all these things that Iran did literally since 1979 to antagonize and attack the United States? Well, it's all Israel, right? Which is kind of how it goes, right? There is this kind of Candace Owens-esque kind of, well, there's this mumbling and shumbling, and then you say Israel, and then you shout, and then you get on a bunch of podcasts. That's a big thing, right? Because I think the Joe Kent thing is his own thing, but the story about we've just gotten to the point where any action that is not considered any action that's basically not us not doing things is by default by a certain segment of the population viewed as, well, it's Israel. And I'm like, is there no world in which the United States independently, obviously with input from allies, because we do have allies, and part of being allies is that you get input, and especially on military operations, is there no world in which the United States can defend its own national interests without it being the fault of how low agency do some of these people think the United States is? Is there no world in which you can rationally say, and this is a broader problem in politics, I suppose we can talk about it if you like, but there's this broader problem in politics where it is the one thing, especially if you're on kind of the Groyper section of the right, the Candace-y section of the right, where it's the one possibility that is absolutely unconscionable and unconceivable to these people, apparently, is the notion that the United States could, and President Trump could, and the Trump administration could, in their own good judgment, determine that an escalation of the situation in Iran is the right thing for America. Is that not a possibility? Is that just a possibility we're categorically screening out? And in my experience, and I'm not an IR person. I don't work in foreign policy. I work in business and corporate America stuff. But it has been my experience that when there are certain conclusions, when you have a movement that has certain conclusions that it categorically will not draw, not for logical reasons, but just for we're not going there reasons, and it turns out that we're not going there, that's a ploy for it would just undo our entire movement. If we're really going into the hardcore isolationist kind of wing of thought here, and there are good arguments for isolationism. I don't find them compelling, but I think they're serious. There are more serious arguments for the United States being isolationist than it's all Israel. I don't think those arguments are compelling, but they are there and they're serious.
Yeah.
Are we just categorically discounting the notion that the United States could decide that what happened in Operation Epic Fury and what is happening right now is necessary to deter one of our most outspoken enemies? You can think whatever you like about Operation Epic Fury. You can think whatever you like about United States posture towards the Middle East more generally. If our generally pro-intervention history, we'll call it, has been good or not, but you have to operate. There are two options. You can think that is completely driven by foreign actors. In this case, it's almost always accused of being Israel, or you can think that the United States has a posture on this sort of thing, and maybe some of that's philosophically grounded in reality. Those are the two. Yeah. Those are the two options.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The thing is with Joe Kent is be sad about his first wife. She was killed by Islamic extremists, although he did seem to blame Israel for whatever reason. Now his current wife, who is a mouthpiece for Hezbollah and Putin on Russian Today, or she was on Russian Today, known to be a left-winger, and it kind of shows me, like, if you wonder why this doesn't make sense, why would you try to embarrass the president who you've been friends with for this amount of time? Sometimes the spouses tell you a lot, so I think in this case you can kind of look to that. I also think, like you said, immediately he's booked on he was going to speak at this Catholics for Catholics things with Candace Owen and Carrie, whatever her name is, who's irrelevant. That doesn't look good. He's already going to be on Tucker. And it makes me, I get so angry at these people. It's not that I don't, and I'm fine with people if they have different views on foreign policy, if they can debate them, we can say, all right, I get it. You're more isolationist. Let's have a discussion. But I just want people to realize Israel is a country the size of New Jersey. Okay. It has roughly, give or take a million or two. It's like 12 million people. Okay. So it's 1/30 of our population, somewhere around there. There are roughly only 15 million. I think there's 15 million Jews in the world. There's like 2 billion Muslims. And the idea that this small country, the size of New Jersey, with 12 million people, is supposedly controlling all of America's foreign policy, it's so ridiculous on its face. I don't even want to argue with that. Trump's going to do, and plus this is Trump. Trump's going to do what Trump wants to do. The idea that Trump's going to get bullied by anybody, even an ally, to do something is insane. We know that's not Trump.
If there's one thing about Trump that has been consistently true is that he is deeply stubborn and follows his own gut on things.
Yeah, he follows his own gut. He's not going to do it. This is what bothers me. It's like, and then the people that are like, Israel's the source of all the evils in the world and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, do you have any evidence? It's never evidence. And what bothers me about that is like, okay, well, if you want to be isolationist, cool. But it seems like the same people that were really upset about Gaza war. I'm like, there's like tons of wars in the Middle East where millions of people have died and you guys said nothing about it. Seems like the only time you guys get mad is when Israel's involved. And here's something that a friend of mine's Jewish sent me. It was really interesting. I mean, it's kind of a side topic, but you know what? It's worth mentioning. Israel, again, Jews are 0.2% of the world population, have won 189 Nobel Peace Prizes in science, technology, engineering, and math. The Muslim world has won 24% of the world, 2 billion. It's won about 3 to 5. And so it's just like, okay, well, you got Israel very successful. You can name innovators, people from that we all know that have made our lives better. And the idea that these people are out, controlling the world, it's just so dumb. I hate arguing with them, but I think people, if their lives aren't going well, they want to blame somebody. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Yaffee program.
This is Chris Reed from Daily Controversy. My friend Isaac Willauer is on. We're filling in for Yaffee here. One of the biggest topics going on right now is the massive fraud within our government. Now, J.D. Vance has been appointed as like the fraud czar, and he's actually going to do the job, unlike Kamala, who was the immigration czar, who basically sat in her office and drank vodka and played solitaire, according to some people. But we actually do need this because Scott Bessent said that he believes there's around $700 billion in waste and fraud in some of our entitlement programs. It could be much more than that. We've seen that in Minnesota with the alleged $9+ billion in fraud from the Somali fraudsters, which, I mean, who would have thought? You have a country with that not too long ago, 15% of the economy was based on piracy. And again, that wasn't in the 1800s. You can't believe these people are stealing from us. That's unbelievable. But there's been one voice in this that has been, I think, has gotten through. I mean, you could argue this guy's the reason that we're not going to have, thank God, Tim Pawlenty as governor in Minnesota another 4 years. And that's Nick Shirley. And Nick Shirley, in this article by Elizabeth Heckman, has, quote, has gone viral for the retort from Gavin Newsom's office after it mocked his investigation. By the way, whoever doing Gavin Newsom's press stuff is an idiot. I'm just going to say that. YouTuber and independent journalist Nick Shirley went viral Monday for his response to Governor Gavin Newsom's office on social media after it mocked its efforts to expose a fraud by daycare centers receiving millions, probably billions of dollars. Newsom's office made fun of him, tried to do this little thing where he looks like a creepy dude. And Nick just says, you do realize I'm trying to help America eliminate fraud and waste, right? No need to try to make me look like the bad guy for exposing fraud. People are over it. Start working for the people. And I think his approval rating in California is 27%. That would be the governor who wants to be president. And this is something that's really sticking to people. People get angry. They pay a lot of taxes. A lot of people struggling, and they get tired of it. They don't want to pay. It says the video that he's put out has been viewed something like 138 million times. The Department of Health and Human Service has in part frozen child care payments to Minnesota. And now it looks like that even though LA is roughly maybe a little bit more than a percent of the population, maybe give or plus, like plus or minus, you got like 15% of all hospice care going through that county, which is crazy because we had like I think it's 1,100% increase in hospice care in that area. And unless there's like the Black Plague has come back to LA, there really shouldn't be that much more. But I just find it interesting because you've dealt with DEI, waste fraud, all these different things. But the Democrats, it used to be like this was a bipartisan thing. Let's deal with waste, fraud, and abuse. That's something we can all agree on. I mean, Bill Clinton had, a lot of government cuts during his administration. Again, that was widely supported. But Democrats are really pushing back against this. They do not want there to be like an audit. The Seattle mayor said she will not be looking into any allegations of fraud by people from foreign countries or Somalis. I'm like, well, I mean, you're telling me that even if it's obvious fraud and people are breaking the law, you're not investigating? No. And I just want to get your thoughts because it's making everyone angry, especially Republicans who are actually paying taxes. And it does seem like one of those things that if the Republicans want to pull the upset in the midterms, this would be something really important to focus on. If you can show significant fraud and then do something about it, that might move your base to be more enthusiastic and get out the vote for you. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation with California and Minnesota and just the overwhelming fraud in our entitlement systems?
Oh man, well, maybe let's start at that last bit. I mean, Republicans do need something to focus on in midterms, and this might be a good one. I think, to your point about Gavin Newsom's socials, look, whoever's running that needs to understand, like in the other 49 states, especially among people who are center, right of center, whatever, there's just a real overwhelming sense of what is going on in California. This is a state. I remember I came on your show, this feels like forever ago. It probably wasn't. It was probably last year during those LA fires, right? Where this is a state that catches, where part of it's on fire at any given point. You should be able to handle fire, and there's just no clear governance. It's not a clear net. It's not a good net of coverage. Look, people need to understand that for most ordinary Americans, I think for a lot of people who are one, just really kind of in deep in politics, and two, apparently Gavin Newsom's press team and social media team, there's this notion of, well, it's fraud. There's always going to be some level of fraud in government. For the ordinary American who works and pays taxes and expects things from the government in return for those taxes, presumably, ostensibly, fraud makes people really angry. Right? Because fraud reads to most ordinary people, most normal, ethical people, as theft. Why? Well, there's that fun thing where it is, right? When you have widespread fraud somewhere, when you have allegations of widespread fraud within a state, which, I mean, especially a state like California, it sounds believable, right? This was not a state that it's like, oh, California has fraud? I wouldn't have known. Their financial discipline has been so exemplary. When you have wide-scale allegations of fraud, you have to address that. You have to address that. And making it seem like the journalist who exposed the fraud is a creep is not like, okay, maybe we talk about the rhetorical side of this. Gavin Newsom's press team has this weird thing where they kind of try and have kind of the pugilistic, bantery spirit of Trump, but without any of the kind of endearing qualities that make that sometimes funny. $1 billion in fraud, or $170 million in Minnesota, or whatever. This is not something that you can just brush away. You need to have something better than that, especially you're coming up on a midterm election. See, this is a matter of public trust, right? This is how does the country perceive your party, right? Because if you're a Republican strategist right now, you're immediately thinking, how can I portray the Democratic Party as the party that kind of like looks the other way at fraud? When journalists like Nick Shirley uncover fraud, we're just going to kind of slam them as creeps for no particular reason, and we're just going to hope that no one pays attention. That's a gold mine electorally, right? It's very easy because you don't really have to do anything. You barely have to frame it. You just have to look at, this is what Gavin Newsom said after people claim that they found hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud. They allege that. So that's where that goes. I think fraud is a really big deal because, again, there's that quote about one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. I think sometimes we can get into or some people can get into the temptation of thinking about fraud that way. It's like, well, $100 gone missing from some grandma in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is close to where I live, is a tragedy. But $100 million, it's like, well, it happens. Budgets aren't always neat. It's theft, right? It's theft from the American people because the fundamental way that taxes are supposed to work is that taxes fund public things, right? They fund things that keep people safe, happy, and healthy, right? Happy, we could even throw that one out, right? Because most people who pay taxes are not happy about it. Look, it's going to be a big deal. If this keeps up from people in blue states, you've basically identified what is going to be one of the major cornerstones of Republican electoral messaging for the midterms, which is if there are hundreds of millions up to billions of dollars worth of fraud and Democrats don't care, yeah, that's a winning argument because Democrats have a lot of, I will say, just in all honesty, right? Democrats have a lot of things that, especially for their base, are really fire-upable, right? They can talk about social unrest. I disagree with their framing on almost all of these issues, but they can talk about social unrest. They can talk about, I don't know, Trump being mean. They've been doing that for like a decade, and it kind of works, at least with the base. They can talk about the war, right? There is a lot of kind of points of social unrest that they can press. But electorally, Republicans really do have a pretty compelling point to make here about fraud, because I distinctly notice that all of the kind of numbers on Nick Shirley's videos, all the view numbers, especially on Twitter or X as it's now called, right? All of those numbers are insanely high because lots of people watch that sort of thing. One, it's scandal. Scandal attracts clicks. But it's the kind of scandal that is very, in theory, should translate quite nicely into electoral momentum. Do you want $170 million wasted in your state? No, you don't want that? Okay, cool. Don't vote Democrat. That's a pretty easy campaign slogan to run with, and it only becomes easier if you do what Gavin Newsom is doing. Whoever's running that social team needs to be told that, hey, you may not think this because you all live in bougie apartments in California, but the other people whose day job is not running Governor Gavin Newsom's Instagram account, the rest of America really cares about that sort of thing, and they're significantly angrier about it than you have any idea what to do with. Maybe a little bit of understanding and respect for the gravity of this situation and the ramifications of this electorally for this party that pays your salary because, you're a comm staffer. A little bit of sense of gravity might be in order there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's out of control. It's everywhere. I mean, they're doing investigations in Ohio and Maine. And again, if you look at the fraud that's happening in California and LA with hospice care, if you just go look at the names, it's a large majority of that people from foreign countries, they're naturalized citizens or people, I'm not sure they're illegal, but people just don't like it. They want people to come here, to participate, to be a part of this great country, to love it. And if you're not going to love it, you're going to steal from it. All those people that want to say we just need open borders and they bring in everybody. It's not. That's really kind of going to hurt their argument. I'm glad that it will. But yeah, I think what they're going to expose is going to be substantial. JD's a really smart guy. The people that are on this fraud team are brilliant. And I think that the more and more you push out, especially near the election, that's going to take a lot of the focus off some of the things that Republicans don't want to talk about as much. And I think it'll put it on them because if you're going to win a midterm, you got to make your base enthusiastic. We haven't done that yet, but you got to make the other party seem like they're not an alternative. I think that's something we can do. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think over the coming weeks and months, it's going to look real bad for Democrats because at its core, they like fraud and they like waste because, again, it benefits their constituents. And if it didn't, they wouldn't do it. All right, let's take a quick break. We got more coming up. Just a second.
It's the Yaffee Program on WVNN.
Chris Reed from Daily Controversy. You're listening to WVNN. My friend Isaac Willauer, who's been published in Fox News, Daily Wire, pretty much does everything. is with me today. This is a great story from Not to Be. It's kind of sad, but the headline is Women who wrote children's book about grief after her husband's death found guilty of his murder. So I don't know if sales will go up or down. We'll see. It says the woman get found guilty of his murder decided to write a flippin' children's book about grief after she murdered him. In 2022, when a Utah wife, Corey Richens, spiked her husband's drink with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, she hoped to inherit his estate, and she already had another lover in mind, so that's nice, planning ahead. She'd also opened up numerous life insurance policies in his name, the benefits totaling $2 million. Did I mention she was broke as a joke? Her internet history showed that she'd searched for lethal dose of fentanyl and also luxury prisons, so I guess we know what she was thinking during this tough time in her life. Prosecutor Brad Bloodworth played a clip of Rachel's 911 call from the night her husband died. Quote, "That's not the sound of a wife becoming a widow. It's the sound of a wife becoming a black widow." Defense lawyer Wendy Lewis said the prosecution looks at facts one way and sees a witch, but if you look at those facts another way, you see a widow. Well, technically she's a widow even if she did murder him. She was convicted of aggravated murder as well as attempted murder. Believe it or not, she tried to poison him with fentanyl on Valentine's Day, and he passed out as a result. That time he survived. Note, if your wife attempts to kill you once, you might want to leave. I've almost forgotten about the children's book, Are You With Me? A story meant to help her sons and other children deal with the loss of a parent. She was on Good Things Utah back in 2022. Okay, I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but, okay, the woman... If you're going, look, I'm a retired attorney. I don't give legal advice. But if you had anything to do with like your husband's death, probably a bad idea to write a children's book about dealing with grief because that's only going to bring more attention, which is what it did here. And of course, she gets convicted. And as it is in every state, you can't inherit someone's money, even if you otherwise would, if you killed them. So I just want to get your thoughts on this in general. I mean, one, have you read the book? And two, what are your thoughts on this Black Widow?
No, I did not read the book
that's too bad.
Are You With Me? I should have. Look, there's a lot of jokes we could make here, Chris. I'm cutting out like 90% of them because it's horrible. But I'm like, the only one it's called Are You With Me? It's like, did she tell the jurors that? Was that like the closing statement?
Are you with me?
Look, let's not gloss over the point that you made, right? On Valentine's Day, she laces her husband's sandwich with Fent. Right? He breaks out in hives and black. First of all, this man's will to live is just incredible. I'm sorry. Like, if my sandwich was laced with Fent, I don't think I'd live. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just going with that. So after this horrible Valentine's Day, which if there are any couples here, this isn't. If there are any wives or husbands listening, this isn't the way, right? Don't do this. You can just talk to your spouse. It's okay. So after this happens. After the failed fentanyl sandwich incident, which are words I never thought I'd say on air, she slips 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, allegedly, 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl into a cocktail. Whose grief? Grief that you're really bad at alleged murder? Like, I don't know. I just feel like back in the day, this just never would. I'm not a big fan of back in the dayism because I was like, the 1950s are great. I'm like, were they? Not really. But how do you explain that? I understand that it's at Not the Bee, which is the perfect outlet to be running this story. I don't know. There are lots of stories about the fentanyl crisis in America that are just awful and terrible, and there are just no jokes to be made because the scope is just so terrible and so many American lives have been lost to it. This one is just... crime does not... If anyone here thought that maybe crime makes you smarter, this kid really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. This is the murder version of cutting a massive divot at the golf course, and you just keep trying, and eventually you take out a golf club that's 5 times the size of this thing, and you manage to hit this golf ball like 2 feet. Like, you completely shank it off to the side. If there are couples therapists listening, and you have clients who are kind of down about their self-worth because they're kind of unsure, I don't know, should I talk to my spouse about this problem? You now have a great parameter to be like, you may have some emotional kind of self-worth issues, self-concept issues, but you are not that. And
You
I
didn't
think
try to
that's the
kill
most
me,
hopeful.
you know?
Yeah, that's right. You didn't try to kill your husband once with a fentanyl-laced sandwich. Failed to kill someone with fentanyl, which is wild considering how lethal fentanyl is, and then 5x dose him in a cocktail and then kill.
Yeah.
You didn't do that. So you can go and have. So this is my plea, right, to all the married people. If you're having marital trouble, just have the difficult conversation with the spouse, right? Just have the difficult conversation. Don't try the 6 total doses of fentanyl in a sandwich and a cocktail, which is just. There are better ways. You can do better. Just do better.
You do better, and it's always
Not at murder. If you're gonna do well at murder, I wish you zero success. But if you're gonna
don't kill anyone. But people like as a retired attorney, they do like criminal defense, and you go to these seminars, and one of the things you learn, like anytime there's a death amongst spouses, they're always going to look at the spouse, but they're especially going to look at the wife if it's done through poisoning, because generally women don't like to kill their spouses if they're going to, like by violence.
One last thing, Chris. I just looked at this article that you sent me. The internet search history from this wife's phone includes what is a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl, of course,
that'll
is
get you.
misspelled. And if someone is poisoned is misspelled. What does it go down on the death certificate as?
Well, you
We're not
want
spending our best embrace.
All I'm saying, look, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people don't plan ahead, and she's trying to plan ahead.
The benefit of the doubt, Chris. I'm really good with not.
What gets people too in these crimes is like, you wouldn't believe it, but this is true in divorce cases. It's people don't understand, like, search history is like the first thing the cops are going to look at, and they're absolutely going to be able to get a warrant easily, and these companies are easily going to comply with it, because search history, that's not that private that they send that out to like advertisers, and the idea that you're going to search for something like that, like at least like you should have gone to a public library and done it, like something like that. They never think of that, because if you're trying to kill your husband, you're already irrational. It's already crazy.
I do love this last bit, though. If the prosecution looks at one fact and sees a witch, I'm sorry, if all the women who were in the Salem witch trials had murdered their husband with fentanyl, I think the historical record on that would be a little different.
Yeah, the jury's out on that. I think a lot of those women probably were witches, but that's another discussion. But
they didn't have fentanyl, though, so
they didn't kill. You know what? They didn't kill them with fentanyl or sandwiches. So
incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. This is why I love not to be. And just a reminder, I mean, we don't almost all the time, but if you subscribing to Babylon Bee is like $10. It's very inexpensive. It's worth it. I love it. They have really good stories, but it just goes to show, like, if you had a problem, work it out. It seems like there wasn't. It didn't seem like there was. And I looked at some other stories. It didn't seem like there was very obvious marital problems. This guy didn't think that she was trying to kill him. This guy was just oblivious. I mean, they had kids. Doesn't look like there's any criminal record history, but
to have that level of obliviousness in your marriage. What a world that must be.
He died happy. All right. Well, that's everything we have today. I want to always finish it on one that's funny. Thank you so much, Isaac, for coming on. We appreciate it. And
thanks,
my
Chris.
friend Isaac will be back. My friend Yaffee will be back tomorrow, and you guys can ask him, send him messages about his new baby. All right. God bless. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
You're listening to Yaffee on WVNN.